The first time I saw her, I wasn't even sure she noticed me. It was late afternoon, and the coffee shop near the bus stop was half empty, the kind of place where the music was always a little too soft, and the barista's cough carried farther than it should. I'd been coming there for weeks, more out of habit than pleasure, ordering the same thing, taking the same corner table, scrolling through the same unread messages on my phone before sliding it face down. That day, she came in. Mid-40s maybe, hair pulled back, wearing the kind of plain blazer that made her look like she was on her way from somewhere important. She didn't scan the room like most people did, she just walked straight to the counter, ordered tea, and stood there waiting, tapping her fingers against the sleeve of her coat. I looked away quickly, pretended to read the flyer pinned to the wall about open mic poetry night. But then I heard her voice. "You always order the same thing." I thought she was talking to someone else until I lifted my eyes and found hers, steady, amused, as if she'd caught me in the act of being predictable. My mouth went dry. "You noticed?" She shrugged, half-smile. "It's hard not to. Every Wednesday. Black coffee. No sugar." I laughed, a little too quickly. "Guess I'm a creature of habit. Or maybe you're just lonely," she said, like she hadn't meant to say it out loud. Then she turned to take her tea, leaving me with the echo of her words. For the rest of that hour, I couldn't focus. The screen of my phone blurred. I kept replaying her voice, low, even, almost careless, but not cruel. More like she'd said something she knew to be true, then immediately regretted offering it to a stranger. When she sat near the window, I found myself sneaking glances. The way she unwrapped the teabag string from her finger. The way she stared outside without really watching anything. I noticed how she folded the napkin into smaller and smaller squares, like she needed her hands busy to keep her thoughts still. I wondered what she carried in her silence. By the time she left, I hadn't said another word. But when she passed my table, she stopped. Just briefly. "You should write instead of scrolling," she said, nodding at my closed notebook lying on top of my phone. Then she walked out, leaving the scent of her tea and perfume behind, something herbal and sharp. I sat there with my notebook open in front of me, pen hovering, but nothing came. That night, in my apartment, I typed out a message on my phone, something about how I'd never seen someone fold a napkin so carefully. My thumb lingered on the send button, but I deleted it before I could embarrass myself. Still, the silence felt heavier than usual. A week later, I saw her again. Same coffee shop, same table by the window. This time she caught me staring before I had the chance to look away. "Still black coffee?" she asked. I nodded. "Still tea?" Her smile was brief, almost reluctant, but it stayed with me long after she left. That evening, just as I was about to turn off my phone, a number I didn't recognize sent me a message. "You're wasted here. Come by tomorrow. I need an assistant." I stared at the words until the screen dimmed, my pulse uneven. I didn't know if it was an opportunity, a mistake, or something else entirely. But I knew I'd go. Her apartment was almost identical to mine, same narrow hallway, same creaking radiator, but it felt different. Lived in. Books stacked in uneven towers on the floor. A small kettle always humming in the kitchen, like it had been waiting for me before I even knocked. "You'll help me with scheduling," she said, sliding a notepad across the table. "Calls, emails, the things I don't want to waste my eyes on anymore." I nodded, though I wasn't sure why I'd said yes. I already had 2 part-time jobs that barely kept me afloat. But something about the way she had texted me, curt, unapologetic, almost staring, had pulled me here. I scribbled notes as she spoke, though my hand kept drifting. She had a habit of running her finger along the rim of her mug when she was thinking. The sound was faint, almost a hum. "You're divorced?" I asked before I could stop myself. Her eyes flicked up. "You do realize that's not a job requirement?" Sorry. You don't have to." She sighed, not unkindly. "Yes. 10 years now." She leaned back in her chair. "I don't usually mention it. People hear that word and they start imagining things. Failures. Scandals. None of it matters anymore. I wanted to ask more, but I bit down on the urge. Still, something shifted. The word hung in the air, heavier than anything else in the room. Divorced. It made her loneliness sharper, but also closer to mine. I caught myself staring at her hands again, neatly kept, no ring, no trace of jewelry. She noticed. What are you looking at? Nothing. She didn't push, but the silence that followed was thick. Later, while I helped her move boxes stacked by the bookshelf, she laughed at my clumsy grip. You're stronger than you look, but not by much, she teased. I almost laughed back, but her hand brushed mine as we set the box down, and the sound caught in my throat. It was nothing, a fraction of a second, but I felt it like a spark under the skin. She stepped back quickly, folding her arms. Careful with those. Some of them are older than you. The word stung, though her tone was light. Older than me. She didn't have to remind me of the distance between us. I was already counting it every time she looked at me like I was younger than I wanted to be. I told myself I was imagining it, that I was just another name on her notepad, another pair of hands she didn't want to pay much for. But when she handed me a cup of tea before I left, her fingers lingered a fraction too long on the rim as I took it. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. And maybe because, for the first time in years, I didn't want to look away. Her kitchen window fogged with steam while the kettle rattled against the stove. I'd been helping her with the endless pile of invoices, my handwriting filling lines she didn't want to bother with. My shoulder ached, but I didn't move. She leaned over to correct something on the page, her sleeve brushing my arm. Close enough that I caught the faint scent of her perfume, sharp against the warmth of tea. You write too carefully, she murmured. Like you're afraid someone will grade it. I smiled, but the pen slipped in my hand. Old habits. She didn't laugh. Instead, she studied me, eyes steady, almost heavy, and for a second I forgot what I was supposed to be writing. Then the knock came. Her neighbor, an older man, stood in the doorway, holding a bag of groceries. You left this downstairs. His eyes flicked to me, then back to her. Not unkind, but curious. Thanks, Frank, she said smoothly, taking the bag. She didn't explain who I was. Didn't even glance in my direction. When the door shut, the silence grew thicker than before. Does he think? I started. Don't, she cut me off. Her voice low, final. She busied herself with the kettle, pouring water into 2 cups as if nothing had shifted. But her hand trembled slightly, enough that a drop of tea spilled onto the counter. I wanted to reach for her, to say something that would close the distance, but my throat tightened. Instead, I noticed how she gripped the mug too tightly, how her shoulders stiffened as though bracing herself. You shouldn't be here this much, she said suddenly, still facing the window. The words hit harder than I expected. You asked me, I know. Her voice softened, almost regretful. But people notice things. And I don't want them to. I should have agreed. I should have said I understood. Instead, I stared at the steam curling between us, pretending it was enough to blur the truth. Later, when I was gathering my notes to leave, she stopped me. Just lightly touched my sleeve. You're good at this, she said. A pause. Better than I thought. Her hand stayed there a beat too long. My pulse stuttered. I turned, and she was close, closer than she should have been. Her eyes flicked to my mouth, then away. I felt the shift, the air tightening, the quiet permission neither of us spoke. I leaned forward, just slightly. Enough to feel the warmth of her breath. And then she pulled back, fast. Shaking her head, half-smile that wasn't a smile at all. Don't, she whispered. I nodded, though my chest ached with the weight of it. The notes in my bag felt heavier than they should. And the door, when it closed behind me, sounded like something final. It was late when we left her apartment together. She had asked me to carry a box of files down the street to a storage unit. Nothing heavy, but enough to give me an excuse to walk beside her in the cool night air. The city felt quieter than usual, shops shuttered, street lamps buzzing faintly. She walked with her hands tucked into her coat, eyes on the pavement. I matched her pace, half a step behind, like I wasn't sure if I was allowed to walk beside her. "You don't have to keep helping me," she said after a stretch of silence. "I don't mind. That's not the point." Her words lingered, more than she probably meant them to. We reached a bench near the corner, and she paused. "Let's sit for a moment." The wood was cold beneath us. She leaned back, head tilted toward the dim sky, exhaling like she'd been holding her breath all week. "I saw you with that girl," she said suddenly, eyes still on the dark branches overhead. It took me a second. "What girl?" "At the cafe. Blonde. Laughing at something you said?" My chest tightened. "She's just a friend." Her lips pressed together. She nodded, as if it didn't matter, but her fingers curled into her coat sleeve. "You don't owe me an explanation," she added quickly. "I shouldn't have, forget it." But I couldn't forget. Not when her voice cracked, just faintly, on that last word. "She's not you," I said before I could stop myself. Her head turned slowly. Our eyes met, and in that instant the air felt stripped bare. Nothing between us but the truth either of us had been willing to name. She looked away, swallowing hard. "You don't know what you're saying." "I do." Silence again. The kind that made every sound sharper, the hum of traffic 2 blocks away, the faint scrape of her shoe against the concrete. "I'm too old for this," she whispered, almost to herself. "Too old for you?" Her words cut, but there was no cruelty in them, only fear. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, staring at the cracks in the sidewalk. "Then why does it feel like I'll regret walking away?" She didn't answer. Not right away. Her hand drifted to rest on the bench between us, fingers open, not quite touching mine. I stared at that space, the almost touch, the half-confession sitting there in plain sight. My hand twitched, aching to close the distance. But I didn't. Instead, I asked softly, "Do you want me to stop coming here?" The question hung in the air like smoke, refusing to disappear. She didn't move her hand. Didn't look at me. And the silence that followed was louder than any answer. For 3 days, she didn't call. The messages on my phone stayed blank. No lists of tasks, no clipped reminders. No reason to show up. At first, I thought maybe she was busy. Meetings, paperwork, some private errand. But by the 4th day, the silence felt deliberate. I found myself walking past her building anyway, telling myself I was just cutting through on the way home. Her window was lit once, then dark the next night. Curtains drawn tighter than usual. I stopped at the cafe instead, the one where we'd first spoken. Ordered black coffee, sat at the corner table. But without her there, it felt hollow, like a stage set waiting for the wrong actors. On the 5th day, she called. Her voice was steady, but too steady. "I won't need you this week. Something's come up." "What kind of, it's personal?" she cut in. "Take the time off." Before I could ask more, the line went dead. That night, lying awake, I imagined every possibility. An ex showing up at her door. A child I hadn't heard her mention before. Some old wound resurfacing, reminding her of the distance she'd been pretending not to notice between us. I told myself I didn't care, but the truth sat heavy in my chest. On the 7th day, I tried to send a message. "Do you want me to stop coming altogether?" I typed it out, stared at the words, thumb hovering over. "Send." Then I erased it. Wrote something lighter instead. "Hope you're okay." Deleted that too. In the end, I sent nothing. The silence stretched on, filling the edges of my routine. I noticed myself checking the time more often, glancing at my phone mid-shift, half expecting her name to appear. But it didn't. When I finally passed her building again, I saw her through the window. She wasn't alone. A man sat at the table with her, older, his voice carrying through the open window in low tones. She was laughing. Not forced, not polite. Just laughing. I froze on the sidewalk, one hand tightening around the strap of my bag. It wasn't jealousy, not exactly. More like I'd been erased, edited out of a story I thought I was still inside of. I turned away before she could look up and see me. That night, I lay awake again. This time, I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused. Like life forgot to finish the sentence. I opened my notebook, stared at the blank page. Wrote her name once, then scratched it out until the paper tore. I thought about knocking on her door, about asking who he was, why she had shut me out. But instead, I left the page blank. And the next morning, her seat at the cafe stayed empty. I didn't plan on seeing her again. Not after the week of silence, the man at her table, the hollow weight of unsent messages. But one evening, walking home from work, I saw her standing outside the building. A grocery bag at her feet, keys dangling loosely from her hand. She looked tired. Not in the way of someone who'd had a long day, but in the way of someone carrying too many of them at once. She spotted me before I could decide whether to keep walking. For a second, her expression flickered, relief, maybe, or regret, but then it smoothed into something neutral. "Need help?" I asked, nodding at the bag. She hesitated. Then, "If you don't mind?" We carried it up together. Her apartment was dim, curtains half drawn. The books were still stacked in the same uneven towers, but something about the room felt different, heavier. She set the bag down and leaned against the counter, arms folded. I stood awkwardly near the door, waiting for some signal, whether I should leave or stay. Finally she said, "That man you saw. He's my ex-husband." The words landed flat, without ceremony. I nodded, unsure if I should ask more. "He wanted to talk. About old things. Things I don't want anymore." She glanced at me, then away. "I didn't know how to explain that to you. So I didn't." Her honesty should have settled something in me. Instead, it stirred everything I'd been holding back. "You didn't have to shut me out," I said quietly. "I would have understood." "Would you?" she asked, not sharply, just tired. I looked down at my hands. "I don't know. But I would have tried." The kettle hissed on the stove, though either of us had turned it on. The silence stretched, thick and fragile. "I don't know what this is," she admitted. "You're younger. And I keep thinking I should push you away before it gets any harder." I stepped closer, not enough to close the distance, but enough that she felt it. "And do you want to?" Her eyes lifted to mine. For once, she didn't look away. "No," she whispered. The air between us shifted, heavy with everything unsaid. My hand twitched at my side, aching to reach for hers. I didn't. Instead, I let the words hang there, raw and unpolished. "I just don't want to be another unfinished sentence in your life," I said. Her breath caught, and for a long moment neither of us moved. Then, slowly, she reached across the counter, letting her fingertips graze mine. Not a grab, not a claim. Just enough to close the pause. I met her eyes, waiting for something more. She gave the faintest smile, tired but real. "Okay," she said. And somehow, that was enough. Time didn't change everything. But it softened the edges. Weeks turned into months, and somehow I kept showing up. Not every day, not always with a purpose. Sometimes just for tea in her kitchen, or to carry a box from one side of the room to the other. Other times, I'd sit on the bench outside while she finished a call, watching the clock hit 8:47 a.m., the same way it had on mornings I used to sit alone with my black coffee. Now, when I walked into the cafe, the barista already knew, 1 black coffee, 1 tea. No questions. She'd smile at that, shaking her head like I was still too predictable. We didn't speak much about what had almost happened, the near kiss, the silence, the weeks of distance. Instead, we let small habits fill the spaces. She left books open on the counter for me to read. I stocked her cupboards with the kind of biscuits she pretended not to like but always finished. Some evenings we'd sit on the bench again, the one where her voice had cracked when she mentioned the girl at the cafe. Now she leaned against the backrest, coat buttoned to her neck, shoulders brushing mine in a way that felt casual but wasn't. It wasn't perfect. She still had days where she closed off, sinking into thoughts I couldn't reach. I still carried the weight of wanting more, though I no longer pushed against it. Somehow, the unspoken became its own kind of language. Once I asked her if she ever thought about the word she'd used that night. Too old. She stirred her tea, quiet for a long moment. Then, not anymore. It wasn't a confession. But it was enough. Sometimes I caught myself staring at her hands, the same way I had in the beginning. Still ringless, still folding napkins into neat squares when she was restless. She noticed once and smirked, sliding the napkin toward me as if to say, "If you're going to look, you might as well take it." I kept it in my notebook. Not as a keepsake. More like proof that I hadn't imagined any of this, that it was real, and ordinary, and ours. Looking back, I don't remember the exact day it stopped feeling temporary. Maybe it was the morning she texted me without pretense. "Pick up milk?" Or the night she fell asleep on the couch mid-sentence, trusting me enough not to finish the thought. Either way, I knew I'd stopped waiting for some grand declaration. What we had was quieter, more fragile, but it held. The last time we sat on the bench, she reached for my hand without looking at me. No hesitation, no pulling away. Just her fingers slipping into mine, like it had been inevitable from the start. And I thought, this is what it feels like when life finally finishes the sentence. Did this story stay with you? What kind of quiet, real love stories do you want to hear next?